morning. It's time to start. We've watched a couple of clips from the movie Roots. And now this video is being recorded on Tuesday during the second block white. It's my favorite second block white class this year. Of course it is. There's no better second block white social studies class in the 8th grade this year. Right? And now that Hannah's 14, she can't be eaten by a cannibal in Omaha. Weird. This class is weird, for sure. Anyway, we're going to talk about King Philip's War a little bit, just one more slide about the middle passage or about the triangular trade. King Philip's War. I got a set of questions that I'm going to have each row answer here in just a minute. And then Salem Mrs. Castro trial. I mean the Salem witch trial.
No.
Oh, don't tell her I said that because she'll get mad at me and then she'll cry and then I have to wipe her tears and pat her on the back and be nice to her. It's hard to be nice to her. It's she's sort of like the 8th grade version of Mrs. Truman in the 7th grade.
Ew.
Yeah. She's not quite as old, but born in 1897 goes back quite a ways. So anyway, this is a plan for today. And then your assignment is just keep working on that study guide. I really don't want to have to deal with anybody getting a 6 on a study guide again. It's too easy of an assignment to not be able to get at least partially correct. So I'm going to move my computer over here underneath the speaker so we should be able to hear everything just fine. All right, so this is where we cut off the other day. We had practiced this. We had demonstrated tight pack and loose pack. Somebody remind me, why would a slave captain use loose pack over tight pack, Weston?
To get
No, that's not.
to get him healthier.
To get him healthier when he gets there. So less likelihood of sickness spreading. And when you get there, you've probably been able to feed them more, which means you're going to show up in Barbados or the West Indies with bigger, stronger, healthier slaves, which means they're worth more when you auction them off. So avoiding disease, starvation, you can't avoid the fear, but all of those are reasons why loose pack would have been better than tight pack. Does that mean tight pack is always wrong? No, if the trip goes quickly and you've got plenty of food and you've got no disease, then tight pack you might make more money. Yeah, of course, all slavery is wrong, but economically, if we're looking at it from the slaver's perspective, there's a reason why you might take fewer. Because most of us would automatically think, let's pack as many on as we can. But realistically, we end up with smaller, weaker slaves, and they're not worth as much on the auction block. By the way, when they would get to Barbados, you saw the sores on the backs of those men in the video clip that we watched, men and women. They didn't really show women. There is a scene that does show women, but they come up with no clothes on, so we don't watch that scene for obvious reasons. But by the time they get to Barbados, sometimes the slave ship captains would, they'd for sure clean their cargo first because they were so horribly smelly, wretchedly smelly. We can use our imagination for that. So they'd wash them off as good as they could before they put them up for auction because nobody wants to buy a slave that smells that bad. And then sometimes they would even use hot tar to cover the wounds on their backs. Yeah, just the cam's like a Band-Aid, but tar over those wounds because their skin was really dark and the tar was really dark. Yeah, horrible. Nothing good about this, but it's justified because we're giving them Christianity and taking them away from cannibalism, and the labor is needed in the islands in the Caribbean.
Wouldn't they not want? Or wouldn't they want skinny ones so that way they wouldn't fight back?
I don't know if you're asking them to do hard labor. You really want a skinny, scrawny slave or one that's big and strong and powerful?
But I don't want one huge, insane.
You don't want a John Cena version of a slave because he's gonna.
I don't want
I
I don't want a 6'6", 200-pound mammoth of a man.
Michael Jordan.
Well, the difference is you're gonna have probably a gun, and they just have guns. Anyway, that's a good question, but no, I don't. I think I want big and strong and healthy, or at least medium. And the other thing that we didn't talk about, I don't think, that is actually a thing, If I buy a big, strong, healthy male slave and a big, strong, healthy female slave, and I require that they make babies, the chances are that the babies are going to be big and strong and healthy. You know, if your dad is 5'2" and your mom is 5 foot even, the chances of you being 6 foot tall are pretty small. You are, for the most part, the product of your parents. Whether you like that or not, you are. You know, my kids are not going to be gigantic because their mother and I, neither one are gigantic. So somehow I'm not really sure, but Tannen is tiny because I don't know why. Because I was never that small and his mother's not small. Anyway, this is triangular trade, and you can see it probably better on your screen, but we've got rum and iron and gunpowder and cloth and tools going to West Africa. It's traded for slaves that are brought to the West Indies, all of these islands in the Caribbean, and then they're traded up into the States, some slaves, some sugar and molasses to make more rum, to buy more slaves, to grow more sugar. And we talked about that triangle and how it perpetuated itself. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. Especially as the southern colonies begin to develop growing cotton and tobacco, the need for slaves increases dramatically. And so slave breeding programs and slaves brought from West Africa become the norm. And it's justified, even if we know that it's a horrible thing. And if you think about it, we justify all of our actions and behaviors. Like, for instance, we know that George Washington, by most measures, was a really good man. Yet he owned slaves. He wasn't necessarily known for mistreating his slaves. In fact, he set them free upon the death of his wife. It was in his will. But George Washington needed those slaves. That's how he kept his wealth. He justified owning slaves because it's the only way he could take care of his family. G-Dub was a pretty good man, but he knew slavery was bad. That's why he set them free. It's sort of like this. Do you know that driving that great big pickup truck that gets 9 miles per gallon driving down the road is bad for the environment? That burning all that diesel fuel or that gasoline is bad. Whether you believe in global warming and all that climate change, it doesn't matter whether you believe in that or not. Is burning fossil fuels bad for the environment? Yes. So why do we keep driving these great big pickup trucks?
Because I want to.
Because either we want to, that's why I have one, or maybe you need to. Maybe you're a farmer and you need this big old pickup truck. So we do things today that we know aren't good, but we do them because we need to. Not much different than the justification for slavery back then. All right. This guy's King Philip. Now I have a set of questions for you. It's a simple set of questions. But first I have to remember where I set them. I have one for each row. So row 1, your question. Figure it out. Okay? And you can all Google it separately or together. This should only take 1 minute. Yours is an easy one. King Philip's real name. Row 2. At the time of King Philip's War, who was the leader of the colony at Plymouth? So the man's name that was the leader at Plymouth. Row 3 plus Jolie.
Yeah.
What kind of weapons were used by the colonists in King Philip's War? Or what kind of weapons did King Philip use? Number 4. You're at it at number 4. How did King Philip get his drip? So he's not dressed like an Indian. How does he get this kingly look? Okay, his drip. And row 5, who wins King Philip's War?
I love that.
H-I-L-I-P.
Wait, what was our question?
Got that?
3's question. What weapons were used by the colonists and what weapons were used by the Wampanoag Indians?
Corbin, you got this. Yeah.
What's his name again, Joey?
This whole guy has a whole war named after him.
I would so wear that hat.
Imagine less than Hitler's war. You just go to fight with a bunch of food.
Oh God.
I don't think you want a war named after you. That seems bad.
What if I win? I
Rowan.
do.
I
That's how you
would want a
spell
war
it.
named after you.
Okay,
Rowan.
so you've had a little time. If you're still searching, still search. But I want to go back to row 1. You had an easy one. What was King Philip's real
How did
name?
he get his
Anybody row
drip?
number 1 real name? Metacomet. Way cooler sounding than Philip. Right? It's sort of like someday when you guys have children, you have to come up with a good solid name for your kids. And this is my suggestion for you. When you're measuring out whether or not it's a suitable name for your child, I want you to think about this. So by the time you're in 8th grade, you guys should be working on a signature. Like, I know that that's not a thing for some of you because I watched some of you sign your paperwork for your Chromebook rollout night and you really struggled with that. You may never need to write anything in cursive other than your signature, but it needs to be unique to you. So work on your signature. And number 2, you really need to work on being able to speak in monster truck rally voice. So like, if we use this to determine whether the name of a child is solid or not, put it in monster truck rally voice. So I'll give you an example. Come to the CHI Center Sunday, Metacomet versus Philip.
Felipe.
Which one you naming your kid? Metacomet or Philip?
Philip.
No!
And his name is Philip.
Metacomet. That
You
just
don't wanna
sounds
be
cool.
Metacomet.
That sounds like a
That guy
WWE
sounds
Yeah.
like
wrestler.
a kid that was bullied.
Bam! So work
I
on
guess
your
maybe
name.
the announcer Jeff.
My name's Metacomet.
Look on
Okay,
Cummings, let's
stop.
hear your monster truck Metacomet voice. Come on, let's hear it. Do it. Do it.
I got one.
Yeah, I want to hear Blessed.
All right,
Yeah,
man, let's hear
West.
yours since you, yeah. You
I
can't
Weston, do it.
somebody else unless you're
Just
gonna
do
do it.
Weston.
But what, okay, Weston, you can do yours, but you can't be so loud that it bothers Mr. Zerr. Monster truck Metacomet.
Alright. Do I have to use that name?
Yeah.
Alright.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Coming to an arena towards you.
Yeah.
Metacomet.
Metacomet.
It's way cooler than
Yeah.
Philip.
I
All right.
Yeah,
By the way-
when it's bloody, yeah, but
Metacomet, well, I've practiced a lot because I'm like, I want to so do a monster truck rally commercial.
That'd be
Metacomet is his name. He's the chief of the Wampanoag, or Wampanoag, except the Wampanoag are big, and there's multiple tribes within them. Sort of like the United States has 50 states, but yet we're all Americans. So all these people were Wampanoag. Metacomet's tribe is the Pokanoket. I like that, the Pokanoket. Okay, anyway. Number 2, the leader of the colonies at Plymouth, Bradford. Is that what y'all got?
No,
What did you get?
I got Winslow.
I think it was Winslow too, but I'm not sure because I did not look this one up ahead of time. So Winslow or Bradford, we're finding.
Harry's fine.
Number 3, weapons used by the colonists.
Guns.
Flintlock.
Flintlock
rifle.
muskets. A flintlock musket. Okay, so it's a little bit different than a rifle or would be today. First of all, muskets are smooth bore, so you just jam a bunch of stuff in the barrel along with powder. But a flintlock means that there's the hammer of the gun that strikes down has a stone on it, a piece of flint. Flint is stone. When flint strikes steel, it causes a spark. So there's a little pan on the barrel that has a powder in it. When the flint strikes the steel, it causes a spark, which ignites that little teeny tiny pan of powder, which shoots a spark down into the barrel, which ignites the powder in the barrel, which causes the explosion. Flintlocks are notoriously inaccurate and sometimes didn't work. Like, you got a pan of powder exposed to the elements. If it gets damp or rains on, is it gonna light?
No.
And once you've fired your flintlock, you gotta reload, and it's gonna take a while. It's not an easy process. So it's not like a gun today where bam, 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 and then you just put some more bullets in it, bam, bam, bam. Not quite. How about the weapons for the Wampanoag?
I got like a spear and a smaller shield.
Did you though?
Dude's got a club.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, a spear is fine. A club, spear, maybe that's a pipe or something. But maybe, I don't know what this thing is on his back, a bow and arrow?
Yeah, that's a bow and arrow.
Okay, so there's advantages and disadvantages. If I'm the colonist and I've got a musket, I get one shot before you attack me. You got a club, so someone's probably going to die. But then once you start swinging that club, you take out a lot of people. So it's not like it's as one-sided as it might seem.
Couldn't they just like, after their one shot, they just flip the gun around?
Use it as I would suppose that would be my tactic exactly. Row 4, how did King Philip get his drift?
Slaves.
Doesn't sound.
Okay, so it's okay that you didn't get an answer because I didn't give you much time. But Philip, he wanted to get along with the colonists, so he traded with them. What better way to get along with someone than to be like them? So his original goal is not war. It's peace. He wants to get along with them. And who wins King Philip's war?
The New England Confederation and its Indian allies.
Indian allies. That means King Philip had other Indians that wanted to get rid of him. That seems weird, but yeah, there were Indians that fought alongside the English. Now, how's this war go down? Well, first of all, if we look at the population of Wampanoag, there's about 10,000 of them. If we look at the population of colonists living in New England, there's 65,000 of them. So the New Englanders way outnumber the Wampanoag. Now, we're not counting all Indians in New England, but the Wampanoag weren't all Indians in New England. So if you're a Wampanoag, and I'm a different tribe, we might have a rivalry. Maybe we don't like each other very much. And if we don't like each other very much, this is a great opportunity for me to defeat you by joining with the Englishmen. So the Englishmen and their allies, a great answer. So here's how the war starts. King Philip wants peace with the colonies, so he calls together the colonists and asks for a treaty, a peace treaty. The colonists demand as part of the peace treaty that the Wampanoag give up their guns. They do have some guns. The Wampanoag refuse, so this peace treaty doesn't go anywhere. And at some point, while they're going through this peace treaty, a Wampanoag Indian is caught stealing from some colonists. Was he really stealing? I don't know. Maybe. So in retaliation for this Indian stealing from the colonists, 3 Wampanoag Indians are hanged. King Philip has now had enough. He's tired of settlers pushing into his territory. He's tired of them taking advantage of his men, so he decides to attack the settlers. These aren't warriors. These are settlers living out on the prairie or on the fields in New England. They're not wealthy men. They're not trained to fight. It's just average, ordinary people. After almost 2 years of fighting, the Wampanoag suffer almost 2,000 casualties. Casualty is a fancy word that just simply means killed or wounded. A wound doesn't mean you're going to die. Killed means dead. A wound, if I get shot in battle in the pinky toe, is it going to kill me?
No, possibly.
It might, because it could get infected, right? And it could, or you could bleed it. But typically, the further a wound is away from your heart, the less likely it is to kill. So you get shot in the pinky toe, or you're running in battle and you fall in a hole and sprain your ankle. You're wounded. Are you going to die from a sprained ankle?
Yes.
Probably not. So casualties is killed or wounded. About 2,000 Wampanoag casualties, over 2,800 colonists. So by casualty figures, the Wampanoag win. But ultimately, because they don't have the numbers to maintain a war like this, King Philip loses King Philip's War. But not until they've destroyed 12 towns and attacked 40 others. And if it weren't for the other Native Americans, King Philip probably loses. Or probably wins over the Englishmen. Sorry.
Wait, so it's called King Philip's War, but he lost?
Yes.
What an L.
Well, let's talk about that. So history is typically written from the winner's perspective, so they got to give it a name.
Well, if you won it, why would you name it your name?
Your name sounds stupid. Would you say your name's war? That's a horrible name for a war.
No, like the winner's name.
The winner's
The
name
winner's
also
war.
sucks.
Like Bill's War.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound near as cool as King Philip's War.
What was
Yeah,
that?
It said
Yeah.
he lost.
Use your monster truck voice and we'll determine that. King Philip's War or Bill's War.
No, what was
You
the other
just
guy's
said
name, though?
Philip is a lame
Yeah, you
name.
did.
Yeah.
It is until you put it with a war.
What was
And
the
you
other
say it in
team's name?
monster truck voice.
Metacom.
I don't know
No,
about
that was
that.
Phil's.
Metacomets. Well, that would have sounded cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nat.
All right.
Who
Let's
names their
talk
kid
about this.
Philip and expects him not to be bullied?
If we were using the textbook, we'd spend about 12 and a half seconds on this. We're only going to spend, 10 minutes on it anyway. But the textbook, I think, the old one that we used to use has like 2 paragraphs on the Salem witch trials because it is a tiny blip that affects very few people in American history. But it has a bigger story. We are guilty of this today. When there's something wrong in society, we find someone or some group of people to blame for it, and then we cast all the blame on them, and we feel better because it's not our problem. We call those witch hunts, and if you're a Donald Trump fan, he's always talking about how people are witch hunting him because it's just accusations after accusations. So how does this start? First of all, we need to understand that Salem, Massachusetts is a village. There actually is a Salem town and a Salem village. Salem town is modern and wealthy. Salem village is old and poor and hardworking and not modern. Yes, that's a good way to describe it. So we're talking about Salem Village in the year of 1692. So we're talking 330 years ago, 340 years ago. And the people that live in Salem are almost all entirely Puritans. And the Puritans that live in Salem are super strict about their religion. Some of you go to church every week. Some of you have never been in church in your life. I'm not judging you either way. But these Puritans, church was the center point of their life. Even those of you that go to church on a regular basis, probably for most of you, school and friends and sports take precedence over church. I'm not saying that's the case with all of you, but that's the case with many of you. For these Puritans, church was it. Literally, they spent several hours a day praying. Hours. Not 10 minutes before bedtime, but hours a day. And Sundays were totally devoted to God and to prayer. So nobody worked on Sundays. In fact, church on Sundays, oftentimes in Salem, Massachusetts, lasted 10 to 12 hours. Can you imagine sitting in church for 12 hours? Even if you love church. Oh my gosh. You know, my church service like 45 minutes. That's about right. I like that. It seems to be about the right amount of time for me to focus on anything. But 12 hours. By the way, even if you're in church for 12 hours, you don't get to sit with your family. The men sat on one side of the church and the women sat on the other side of the church with the children. So they segregate church by sex. I think that's kind of strange. And all sins are punishable within the church, even falling asleep during church. You got to be there 12 hours. Try not falling asleep, right? So this is difficult, and all bad things were believed to be a cause of the devil. So anything bad that happens in Salem was caused by Satan. So here's how this stuff gets started. The preacher in this town is a man named Samuel Parris, Reverend Parris. Oh yeah, by the way, a few more statistics here. Children, Puritan children, 12 years old and older, worked full-time. So there is no childhood beyond 12 years old. You are an adult at 12, which also means you're doing other adult things. So in colonial times, it would not have been unusual for 12 and 13-year-old, 14-year-old women to bear children. Today that happens, but it's pretty strange in our society. Boys worked outdoors and girls worked indoors with their mothers, and they did not allow toys or games. This would be a really boring life to grow up in Puritan Salem, Massachusetts. You guys will have to ask Mrs. Kastrup about it sometime. Winters were long and cold. Anyway, the boss sort of Salem is Reverend Parris. And in that society, the reverend is one of the wealthiest men. So people give a tithe to the church, and the reverend benefits from that. So Parris is wealthy and influential, and he runs the church. He has a couple of daughters, and he has an extended family. And Parris actually himself has a slave girl named Tituba, Tituba. Tituba is not African. She comes from the islands. She's probably from Hispaniola, which would be Haiti. So Tituba speaks a little bit of English, but not good English. And she speaks her islander language more often than not. But her only job as a slave, I guess if you had to be a slave, being Tituba wouldn't be that bad. Your job is to do daycare with the reverend's children. So she has to entertain these little girls. just play with them. She can't read, so they're not reading books, and the Bible was the only book anyway. But she tells them stories. And these little girls, by all accounts, like Tituba. And sometimes her stories get a little wild and crazy. Tituba, by the way, is not Puritan. She practices whatever religion they had on the islands, which is probably something kind of like voodoo. If voodoo exists, there's some debate about that or not. So Tituba's telling stories and actually takes time to tell the girls' fortunes. Do you think Puritans who are very strictly devoted to the Word of God believe in somebody predicting your future based on your fortune? I don't believe in it. Like if I went to the carnival and there's someone who's reading palms or a fortune teller, I might pay $5 just for the fun of having someone read my fortune, but I'm not going to put any science into it. I don't believe it. It'd sort of be like if you guys really 100% believe that my magic 8-ball was accurate all the time, and she is, by the way. Really? You're that simple to think that a piece of plastic can predict the future for us?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Says
So she's
magic.
telling them their future, and one day she's talking to a little girl named Betty Paris, that's the daughter of the Reverend, and also a little girl that's related to the family. Her name is Abigail Williams. And as she's telling them these stories, the girls begin to scream and writhe in pain for no particular reason. So all of sort of like a seizure can come out of nowhere. These girls are and nobody can figure out what the heck is going on. Doctors examine these two little girls and they find nothing wrong with them. And it starts to spread, and other little girls and other little boys start screaming with agony and pain. So automatically the Reverend assumes that something evil and dark is going on here, and it must be the devil speaking through these little girls. And where were they exposed to the devil? It must have been Tituba, because she's not Puritan. It's her stories. She's guilty. She's a witch. Now, everybody knows, by the way, the witch trials in America are short-lived, but they've been going on in Europe for decades. They were almost over in Europe, but it's a new fad in America. And everyone knows that a witch is never traveling alone. Witches travel in groups called covens, which means anytime there's a witch, there are at least 12 others.
Oh, so
A
that's
coven makes 13 witches. So automatically they grab Tituba, who doesn't really understand what is going on because her knowledge of English is limited. And they're like, "You are a witch." And she's like, "Well, whatever. Who are the other witches?" So she starts pointing out her friends. So the accusations are real and immediate. And pretty soon it doesn't take very long for everyone to figure out that all I have to do to get even with anyone that might be an enemy of mine is accuse them. You're a witch. Now in our society today, you are innocent until proven guilty. But in Salem, Massachusetts, you are guilty until proven innocent. So this is a horrible situation for anybody accused of being a witch. Another lady that's accused, Rebecca Nurse. She's just a nice old lady. Somebody didn't like her. John Proctor, a minister, was accused of being a witch. A male witch is a warlock. Dorcas Good, that's a name, isn't it? Dorcas Good, a 4-year-old girl, was accused of being a witch. So these accusations are just flying. Imagine how scary that would be to be part of that society where all anybody has to do is accuse you. Horrible.
Wait, are male witches not wizards?
Warlock.
What the frick is a wizard then?
I don't know. Like a lizard with a W.
It's actually supposed to be an
That's
animal.
so-
There are 150 people in this small village that are eventually accused of being practicing witches. One woman, her name is Ann Putnam, accused 62 of them.
She did not.
So she's just walking around, witch, witch, witch,
Everyone that likes me.
double witch, I don't know, sandwich, I don't know. That's a new one, I just came up with that. So from June to September, there's all these 150 people accused of practicing witches. 19 of them are hanged. Hanged. One man is pressed to death. Pressing, his name is Giles Corey, by the way. We know history here because they wrote it down. Pressed to death would be like if you laid me on the floor and took a board and set it across me and started stacking stones on it until I was squished to death.
Oh.
Horrible, torturous way to die. And 4 died in jail. The ones that died in jail admitted to being witches because it saved their lives.
How?
Those that were hanged refused to admit that they were witches. So this is crazy, and eventually it's got to stop. How's it stop? The governor of Massachusetts intervenes and says, "What the heck are you guys doing? There's no witchcraft here. That's an old European thing. Stop it." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And the witchcraft trial stopped. But if we look back in European history, this is kind of fun to look at because it's comical in its craziness. If we look back in European history at ways you could prove that you weren't a witch because you are guilty until proven innocent, there weren't very many ways. One is, for instance, called the balance scale. Do you know what a balance scale is?
Yeah.
Something that weighs exactly the same. These are not tests that were used in Salem, Massachusetts. These were used in Old England. The balance scale, they would put a person that's accused of practicing witchcraft on one side of the scale and a Bible on the other. And if they balanced, the person was innocent.
It'd be like impossible to balance.
What?
Yeah, what's a Bible weigh? Like 6 pounds, maybe?
That
It's like
4-year-old.
put a thorn on there.
Not even a newborn. I mean, most. Yeah. So no, you're gonna be guilty of being a witch. Or how about this one? And you can see this in the pic here. A devil's mark, also known as a witch's mark. If you have a scar, a mole, a freckle, etc., it was believed to be said that it was put there by the devil for him to feed on your soul.
So ginger is ours.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Just think about your own body, not somebody else's. But I doubt there's anybody in here that doesn't have a freckle or a mole or a scar somewhere visible. If your skin is perfect. If you look in this picture, and you can probably see it better on your Chromebooks, this woman's blouse is stripped down in her back, and they're examining her for devil's marks. So, I mean, they'll find them on me, and I'm assuming that probably all of us have blemishes on our skin. So if they look, they're going to find them. So the devil's mark. And then, on top of that, they said that the devil only placed them on those that he could not trust. So if no devil's mark was found, you still weren't innocent. These are tests that you cannot pass. Stripped naked and shaved and searched for devil's marks, tied to a chair in a prison cell or a jail cell. If in a certain amount of time a rat or a mouse or a beetle approached, you were seen as a common with familiars or evil spirits. And think about how dirty a jail cell in 1692 would be. Cockroaches, mice, rats. Gross. They also did one called Ducking the Witch. This one's kind of fun. See if you can survive this. They take your right thumb and they tie it to your left big toe. Okay? And then they chuck you in a pond.
What?
If you float to the surface, you're a witch because that's seen as the devil below pushing you up to save
But
yourself.
witches don't, they can't handle water.
If you sink,
Good.
you're innocent, but you're
Dead.
dead because you've drowned.
So I know.
So there's one you can pat, sort of. How about this one? Ordeal by fire. There are dozens of these, by the way. The accused has to carry a red-hot iron straight from a fire for 3 meters. 1, 2, 3. Drop it. Their hands were immediately bandaged. After 3 days, they remove the bandages. If there is a wound or scarring, they are a witch.
But the witches heal themselves. What?
You can't pass it. These are meant for people to fail. Or how about, so understand, these Puritans are super, super religious, right? And the Englishmen that were practicing these tests were pretty religious also. I'm going to assume those of you that go to church regularly, and it doesn't even matter what church, you probably have a version of the Lord's Prayer. It might be a little bit different from church to church. When you go to a friend's church, they might say it a little bit different. But there were 2 tests here with the Lord's Prayer. One, if you said it exactly perfectly, you're not a witch.
Wait, what?
But What's the chances you can say it perfectly when you've got the entire village staring at you? You get nervous, right? One of them says that you had to say the Lord's Prayer backwards to prove that you weren't a witch. Now, I don't know about you. I can say the Lord's Prayer, but I can't say it backwards. In fact, I'm really good at the alphabet, but if you ask me to say the alphabet backwards, I can't. Give me 20 minutes of practice and I can probably do it. But right now, no, I could start with a Z and then I'm done. So you get the idea that none of these tests were meant for anybody to be able to prove their innocence. Everybody is guilty. So it takes someone stepping in and saying, stop it, you goofballs. This isn't even a real thing. So what happened in Salem, Massachusetts is only a blip, and only a handful of people are actually guilty and hanged. By the way, past tense of the word hang is hung or hanged. I just think hanged sounds way cooler, like Old West, so I go with hanged. You can say hung and you're not wrong, but I'm sticking with hanged. Probably your English teachers would say hung, but if you look it up, neither of us are wrong. And some vocab for today, backcountry, those western edges of the colonies, navigation acts, those are the pokes in the ribs that are going to upset us to the point where after 120 some more years of this, we're going to have to fight back. Triangular trade, we talked about for a whole block the other day. And smuggling is buying or selling goods illegally. So if you can't get something out or get something in, you can illegally.